What's up, everybody? Checking in again here, making a special video today. Very excited to talk about this band. Another 70s band, this time from the mid to late 70s. Outside of that golden era of the early 70s, like 1970 to 1973, this is a band that put out a record in 1976. Probably one of my favorite records of 1976. Now, the 70s got progressively worse as they went on in terms of quality of metal and rock. As you know, disco and some other styles started to take over in the late 70s. Rock and metal, proto-metal, early proto-stoner really had its peak in the early 70s. But there are still some fantastic proto-stoner records from mid to late 70s. There's just not tons and tons of them like there are in the early 70s. This band is one of my favorite discoveries, of 70s proto-stoner, for sure. One of my favorite albums. The band is called Truth and Janey. This is the album No Rest for the Wicked. As you can tell by the album cover, you pretty much know what you're in store for when it has a big old Marshall amp on it and guitar in the background. It doesn't get much more heavy metal looking than that. There's a hand reaching out of the ground, which also gives it that doom vibe. Look at that hand reaching out of the grave. Yeah, this album artwork is sweet, and you know exactly what you're getting. Thick, monstrous, proto-stoner rock right here from 1976, from Iowa. So, I grew up in Nebraska. Nebraska is one state over from Iowa. So this was only 4 or 5 hour drive from where I grew up. And the Midwest, not exactly an area known for its rock and metal scene. There's been some bands from the Midwest, but it's not a super big area for that kind of music. More of a country type of area, country music type of area, but there are some great bands from the Midwest, and Truth and Janey is one of the favorites I've found, one of the best from the Midwest, and a small town in Iowa. And it's really the only heavy stoner rock band I've found from Iowa. There's probably more. I'd be interested to find some more from that area, but Truth and Janey, one of the best bands of the mid to late 70s for sure. They put out one of my favorite records of 1976, No Rest for the Wicked, and I wanted to talk a bit more about the album, so I'm going to do that in this video. I'm going to give you a slideshow of some pictures, talk about the album, give a review that I wrote of the album in my Facebook group, as well as reading out of the booklet. There's a nice booklet with this, has some interesting information, so I'm going to read out of that. Truth and Janey is a band that everybody should know. It's on YouTube. You can also get it on Bandcamp and buy the CD. You can also get this from Rockadrome Records, fantastic label. So let's talk about Truth and Janey today. Thanks for watching. Doom on. I appreciate everybody tuning in to this presentation about one of my all-time favorite 70s proto-stoner, hard bluesy rock bands. One of my favorite discoveries, especially from the mid-70s. I mean, the early 70s was obviously great, but the mid-70s, not quite as many albums in this vein came out. So this was released in 1976, so this is one of the best from the mid-70s. A great Midwestern band, Truth and Janey. So let's get into it. I'm going to read out of the booklet here that came with the album that I have. It says, the musical group Truth and Janey was formed sometime in late 1969 in a small city in Iowa by original members Billy Janey, Steve Bach, and John Fillingsworth. The band pulled its name from the title of a Jeff Beck album and drew inspiration from Beck as well as Cream and Hendrix. And this lineup would last barely a year. Then Dennis Bunce would come in and replace Fillingsworth and form what would be the group's legendary lineup. By 1972, the group was regularly performing and writing original material. It was in this time that they would release their debut 7-inch 45 RPM featuring Midnight Horseman and their cover of the Rolling Stones' Under My Thumb. Although guitarist Billy Janey claims that 1,000 copies of this single were pressed, to a collector nowadays it feels a lot more like 100 copies because it's extremely hard to turn up. During 1973, the band released their second 7-inch single on their Driving Wheel label and shortly thereafter changed their name from Truth to Truth and Janey. The songs Straight 8 Pontiac and Around were featured on the group's second 45 RPM. It was also around this time they became aware of another band signed to a major label that was using the name Truth. So they changed their name to Truth and Janey to avoid any confusion or legal hassles. The band did a fair amount of touring during the 73 to 75 period, including dates in the Leslie West Tour, shows in Canada, Kansas, Illinois, Nashville, and other Midwestern cities, and as well as a large musical festival with Blue Oyster Cult in Davenport, Iowa that drew some 20,000 hard rock fans. All the while, they were writing original material and gearing up for the release of their first full-length album. So in 1976, they laid down the tracks that would form the now infamous No Rest for the Wicked album, released later that same year. The record featured 6 original tunes and 2 traditional blues covers, in true powerhouse Truth and Janey fashion. Only 1,000 copies of the album were pressed. Since its release, it has grown steadily over the years in popularity among collectors of 60s and 70s hard rock and psychedelia, with original copies now fetching a large sum in the collector's market. It has been lauded as perhaps the best and most promising independent U.S. heavy hard rock release of the entire 70s decade. And one thing's for sure, you won't hear many arguments to the contrary. Unfortunately, disco reared its ugly head around 1976 and severely damaged the lives of many small hard rock bands around the country, including Truth and Janey. So of course, disco, as we all know, it became big in the mid to late 70s, and the hard rock, heavy metal scene suffered. A lot of these bands just couldn't gain much momentum during that time. They fell out of favor, and it killed that whole scene, unfortunately. And so Truth and Janey just released this album, No Rest for the Wicked, too late. It's definitely the quintessential 1970, 1971, 1972 type album, and they released it all the way in 1976. So just a little too late on the ball for this one, unfortunately. So just as their ball started rolling, it ended when Dennis Bunce left the group. In a last-ditch effort, guitarist Billy Janey reformed the group with all new members in 1977 and released Just a Little Bit of Magic, but it was a move in a completely different direction and has little to nothing to do with the ferocious hard rock guitar Marshall 100-watt super lead sound that dominated No Rest for the Wicked. By 1978, this lineup had disbanded and Truth and Janey were done for good. Bassist Steve Bach left for California to join commercial rockers Nowhere Fast, and drummer Dennis Bunce left music altogether, and guitarist Billy Janey remained in Iowa to start a solo career. Janey went on to release several blues guitar-oriented discs under the name Billy Lee Janey throughout the 80s and 90s, and is still recording and releasing material today. During the early 90s, word of Truth and Janey's popularity among collectors made its way back to the band, and it was decided that something should be done to help appease the ever-growing demand for the band's long sold-out debut LP. It was at this time they decided to do a new limited vinyl pressing of the original No Rest for the Wicked album, and to further feed demand, a mind-blowing double album concert recorded from '76 was also released. With the new millennium, there was again another surge in activity in the Truth and Janey camp, as the group was contacted regarding the official re-release of the band's entire catalog. The No Rest for the Wicked compact disc is the result of the collaboration between Truth and Janey and Rockadrome Records. Now, Rockadrome Records is a fantastic label for this early 70s proto-stoner hard bluesy rock. If you love the sound on this album, check out Rockadrome Records. They've released many, many great albums right out of San Antonio, Texas. Of course, they also released the Truth and Janey Erupt CD, which features a live concert recording from 1976. I'm going to go ahead and read my review of this that I wrote in my group. It says, "Stamp this one in your heads, ladies and gents. One of my favorite things to do is track down old proto-metal albums from the 70s, and this is almost a never-ending gold mine that turns up record after record of proto-stoner and heavy psych, all of which would be all but forgotten without the internet. And this is one rabbit hole that is completely worth the time and effort to take. And this beautiful album I'm holding, released back in 1976, It's No Rest for the Wicked by Truth and Janey. How many of you have heard this one? These guys came from Iowa, of all places, which is right near my neck of the woods. The Midwest actually had a vibrant proto scene in the 70s with numerous bands just like this. This is where stoner started. This album is full of mind-melting riffs and pummeling percussion. The vocalist is also really solid. Songwriting is top-notch, and the album has several memorable tunes that will get stuck in your head. It's a shame bands like this wallow in obscurity while classic rock radio plays the same 10 songs over and over to the point of torture. I guess we will just have to be thankful for our musical curiosity and spirit of conquest to dig so many of these up and spread the word. Boomer metal doesn't get much better than this, so check it out today. And find my Roots of Stoner Doom playlist on Smod for over 100 records just like this. My favorite tracks from the album are Down the Road I Go, The Light, Remember, It's All Above Us, and of course the closing track, My Mind. So this is one album you should definitely track down. If you can't find it, to buy it. At least you can find it for streaming, probably in quite a few places. I know it's on YouTube, but I would track it down and buy the album if you have a chance. So of course, a little bit more about the album. It kicks off with Down the Road I Go, which is a fantastic opening track. Really one of those nice hard rock and intense opening tracks that really catches your attention. The Light is also another great track that follows that up, and one of my favorite tracks on the album. The next track is called I'm Ready, which is a cover of Willie Dixon, the famous blues musician, one of his tracks, which is a really nice, nicely done cover song. But the next track, Remember, is a 9-minute epic, the centerpiece of the album. It's a very glorious, psych-infused anthem of a song. Definitely one of their all-time best. So check out Remember if nothing else. It's a nice 3-part song where it kind of has different segments to it. It's one of those songs that kind of has multi-songs in one. Just a real masterclass song. The title track, No Rest for the Wicked, is really great, as well as It's All Above Us, a nice hard rocker. These have a nice dark tone to them, a nice gritty bluesy tone. Really great songs, great riffs, fantastic vocal work, and it closes with My Mind, which is perhaps the heaviest song on the album and the doomiest song on the album. It's a very, very great closing track. My Mind is just a really nice, doomy, heavy song to close the album. And of course, if you have the CD, you get the bonus tracks, which include Midnight Horseman, and Midnight Horseman is a really great song, so it's another reason to find it and buy it. This album is just really great from beginning to end. So thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation about Truth and Janey, and I hope if you haven't heard these guys, this will help you find a new discovery that you really love.